Well, hello again after an incredibly brief break. Just received a WhatsApp message from a member of my family, and her son is doing a project on World War II and how he's connected to that. So he's connected to that through my parents, his great-grandparents. Woo, yeah. We're in ancestral realms here. We certainly are in ancestral realms. So, specifically how they met. What I will say to start with is my mum and my dad, for them, World War II began when they were 10, 11 years old. And my father's first vivid memory about being that age was he'd broken his leg and he was in hospital under traction. That's what they did in those days. They used to make you lie down in bed for many weeks, and they always get the broken leg, put it in the plaster cast and have it pointing upwards like that, held up by some rope. So he was like that, and he heard from the news that there was World War II and there was a chance the Germans were going to invade, and that was one of the seminal moments in his entire life about when he completely became overcome by fear and powerlessness. So I don't know, I'm going to begin with that one because that's just how it comes out with these things. My mum, on the other hand, at the outbreak of World War II, found herself living in a village. She didn't have any accents or anything like that, but what she was doing, because at that point, and it's really amusing to think about this, considering the history of the 20th century. At that point, the Russians were the allies of the British and French and all the other countries that were against Germany. And so what was being asked, the charities were asking people who were living through World War II to collect money for the Russian orphans. Now, things were so difficult, so challenging at that time for my mother, incredibly challenging for her. Her father was out. First of all, he was a miner working down the pit, and when World War II kicked off and we started getting Italian prisoners of war, when eventually German prisoners of war, he then found himself being a guard in a concentration camp. So whether he was down the pit or a concentration camp guard for prisoners of war, he was just not really around much. And my mother's mother suffered from both psoriasis and schizophrenia, so she was brought up pretty much by her older sister, and there was a lot of friction and conflict between the two of them. So moving forward all the way through World War II ended, and the year World War II ended, my parents were now young adults in their very late teens. So I can just do a quick sum. So 17, something like that, 17, 18, yeah. So how they met, because this is a specific question I've been asked to answer. So during World War II, when my dad was 14, he left school. And he left school because he went to what was called the modern school. It was for the people who didn't manage to get into the grammar school, and it's an even more poignant and interesting story, this, because actually my father did do his studies. He did pass the 11 plus exam to enter the grammar school, but what the authorities wanted was for my dad's mum to pay for his school uniform. Now at that point my dad's mum was a widow, so she didn't have much money, and she said, no, I can't afford it, sorry. So he never went to grammar school, so he went to modern school. So he knew that he was been on the track to not getting an academic qualification, but simply getting any kind of job he could possibly find. He knew that was his reality. So by the time he was 14, World War II is full on, all going on. Yes, Gopal. And he's faced with getting a job in a foundry, which is a place where they turn steel. Well, if they make steel, they make iron out of the raw materials, iron ore and all the rest of it, And they use the steel created to make objects, railway lines, car bodies, whatever it is you want to make, dishes, anything, railings, whatever. And he had an absolute horror of doing that, because he knew that he would have a very short life expectancy, because it's a very dangerous job. Literally, molten metal is splashing and spraying out all over the place with all of these operations. And he met a relative, and the relative came to stay for the weekend with his young wife, and these people changed his life, because the relative explained to him that, being the age that he was at, what he could do is he could apply to the Royal Air Force to become an apprentice. And that would mean that he would leave home, he'd go somewhere and live independently with all the other RAF apprentices. They'd have their own barracks. He would learn what it's like to be in the military. So this point is 1946. So World War II has just finished, a matter of some months previously, back in 1945. So here he is. What an idea. Yeah, this is my way out of the foundry in a short lifespan. So he took the opportunity up with alacrity. He applied, he got in, he was accepted, and he was selected, and he was chosen and made his choice to become what they call a fitter, or an aircraft apprentice. So his job was, the aeroplanes come in after the people have been flying, after the pilots have done their missions, whatever the mission may be. The aeroplane lands and it goes straight into the hangar, and the fitters swarm around like the aircraft, like a bunch of ants, and their job is to check the aircraft over, everything about it, to make sure it's in full functional condition. If it's not, they have to repair it immediately and get it ready to go out again, because they're post World War II, they're really on it with all that kind of stuff. So that's what he's doing. Now, he has a very unexpected event happen in his life. There's a particular point where he is sexually abused by one of the apprentices, and he keeps this information to himself for more than 60 years, and I'm the very first person that gets to hear about this, because I have done his universal soul retrieval, which was his ultimate shamanic healing practice that I did for him, and it was after I'd done that USR. But this often happens with shamanic work. After work's been done, that's when the client wants to start to share. And so he shared that with me, and he said, the woman I married doesn't know anything about this. So it felt like a huge honour, and I can only share that with you now because he is my ancestor. They are both my ancestors. My parents are both my ancestors, and I have the permission to share this information with you as a result of them being ancestors. And I do have a relationship with them, which is nearly 2 years of every single day tuning in and gratitude going on. That's a very important detail to share too. So as well as that, the United Kingdom, Great Britain, after World War II was very impoverished. They spent so much of their money on participating in a war whereby huge numbers of people are killed. Still happens today, doesn't it? Yeah. Head scratching time, but there we are anyway. So that's the situation. So the country is impoverished, and so they don't have enough coal to heat the barracks where he's staying, and so they become ill. Some people get cold, some people get the flu, influenza, and the other thing that's going on, they don't have enough food. The food is being rationed. So it's too cold to work and live, and there's not enough food to eat to function. So he ends up with tuberculosis, so they put him into a hospital, and because he is suddenly in a hospital ward and a sanatorium ward for recovering from tuberculosis, this is how the story unfolds. Now let's go back to my mum. So my mum doesn't have a relative that gives us the great news about the RAF. I don't remember how she heard about it. The important thing is she got the idea into her head somehow. Totally independently, both living in Yorkshire, father in a big city, mother in a tiny village. She found herself getting a job for the RAF, the Royal Air Force. One of the things that she does is she learns to be a driver of lorries. So that's the first thing she does. Trains to be a lorry driver and qualifies to be a lorry driver. And time goes on, and she's asked to work in administration in that very same hospital as my dad's working, as my dad is a patient in. So this is where it all starts to come together, isn't it? So you can imagine what happened. My mother at that point, she would be late teens. She's starting to be fed somewhat better than she was at home, because she's been in the RAF for some months. That's the thing I need to explain about my dad as well. Although he was definitely malnourished and not warm enough to be safely functioning, they were probably better off than people in civilian life at that point. It's a bit of a thing to realise. It's a lot of hardship after World War II for the British people. So what then happened is that she would be striding along the corridors of these hospital wards and floors and departments with papers, taking papers here and there, administrative stuff, having learnt to type and all the rest of it in those days. And my dad was lying in bed in this very special room, and in fact the special room is in, it's rather like what I'm in here, because what you've got is you've got a floor and you've got a wall behind you and walls at the end, but straight ahead it's wide open to the air. And this is all the year round. This is going to seem completely paradoxical and contradictory, because one of the causes of his tuberculosis was being too cold, but when he's recovered to a certain point, this is what they do, they put him in a place with the whole of the front wall open, and that's because that is supposed to be really good for recovery once they've reached a certain point. So that's what he was doing. So he was basically looking at the view, and you can imagine, can't you, he's looking at the view and this woman walks past in her uniform and she looks absolutely amazing. And somehow my father, a very intense human being, 1, 2, 3, 4 planets in Scorpio, count them, 4 planets in Scorpio, very intense. What he did all his life is he used to emanate a very powerful energy from his eyes. We tend to think of eyes as taking information in, and we're a bit more savvy, especially anyone on the shamanic path knows, we also emanate energies from our eyes. So his eyes would have emanated an energy towards her, and she responded. And at that point she was having the life of Riley, as we like to say in that part of the northwestern Europe, England, Ireland, which means to say that she was a radiantly beautiful, intelligent, active, physically fit woman. And what she used to do, she loved to play tennis. She has all these tennis partners, and she has told me that she had 6 tennis partners, all who wanted her to go out with them. And then she met this guy lying in his hospital bed, recovering from a horrible wasting disease, and she chose him over the 6 tennis players. So that's quite something, and that tells you something about the nature of the pair of them, I suppose. And there's another little detail which I do want to add to this story, which is that the only reason why my father was alive at that point is because, being a military person, he was the first of the people in England to be offered the antibiotics, because antibiotics first came into mass production around about 1945, 1946 time. So they offered him this drug, and it cured him of the tuberculosis. I think it was streptomycin, if I remember rightly. It worked. It did the job. One hit. Before that, they used to have to subject people to a horrendous operation. What they used to do, they used to put them under anaesthetic, and they used to open up one side of their chest, have to cut through all the ribs to do this. They would collapse one lung, put it all back, wait. It's just horrific. And they'd have to open up again and reinflate lung, and if there was tuberculosis in both lungs, they'd have to do the same thing. So he was facing the possibility of up to 4 operations, all of which could kill them. Instead he took some pills and got better. So this is my interesting relationship with the pharma industry. On the one hand, I only exist because he exists, because he was given the streptomycin that saved his life. On the other hand, there's a lot of drugs I certainly wouldn't consider taking because I reckon they're too toxic. I'll just throw in the word Ozempic apropos of nothing at this point in this conversation. You can look that up, find out what that's used for. Ozempic. Interesting choice. Right, so that's basically how they met. And because the times were so very poor, eventually he was discharged from hospital, and they had a registry office wedding in the town of Aylesbury, which is a largish town in the southeast of England. And of course, it was very difficult to get accommodation then. The joke about England, it's always difficult to get accommodation, but it especially was then. So they ended up living in a caravan in an orchard, and that's where I was born. So that's how they met, and they didn't even have anyone to be their witnesses. They had to drag a couple of passers-by from outside to witness their civil marriage, as it's called. So that is the story of my mum and dad, how they met each other and how they got married. And things stayed rough for quite a while. The first job my dad got out in civilian life was basically in a sweatshop making briefcases, and eventually he managed to get a job working for the gas company, and eventually he managed to get a job working for the civil service, and his job was to test rocket motors, the whole kind of post-World War II military industrial complex thing. So I'll leave it there, and thank you very much, Gopal, for joining me on this particular film. I do appreciate your presence. I believe Cameron might have been up as well at some point. I was so absorbed in the film, I wasn't actually fully cognizant of exactly what was going on then. So, in the style we have developed, it's time once again for me to raise myself up, decant the feline in an appropriate manner, wish you all the love, and press the off button.